The one call that was going to change everything was inflation and interest rates have peaked. And we're moving into a period of productivity caused by new technologies.
What drove the idea for that call? You made that call, I think.
So, yes, at that time, just to give you a sense of how long ago that was and how different the world was, we wrote one piece for our clients a quarter. It was a 20-page single-space typed tome.
I remember those reports.
Yes, yeah. And I threw my heart and soul into that, and it was really an economics piece around what the Reagan revolution was going to cause.
Wow!
So lower tax rates. I mean, he slashed individual tax rates by 25 percentage points. We were coming from crazy levels. And the Fed, Chairman Volcker, at the same time was strangling inflation out of the system. That's another tax rate. And of course, a good disciple of Art Laffer, I was saying, wow, taxes are coming down dramatically in this country. The PC was being born and actually seemed like it might be useful, although the use cases took a while. It took Microsoft really evolving to really get that productivity kicked in. But all of that was coalescing at the same time. It was very exciting. And I think being young and impressionable and just picking up on all of this was important, because most people, the seasoned professionals at that time, they had lived with inflation brewing, and from the mid-'60s, 1964, Great Society under Lyndon Johnson, and the Vietnam War, so guns and butter. And it had been brewing. And then we went off the gold exchange standard in 1971. We closed the gold window. And then all hell broke loose with inflation and interest rates. So it had been 15 to 20 years that these seasoned professionals had been dealing with this problem. And they just didn't think it was going to change because Henry Kaufman, these are names maybe you know, maybe you don't know.
I know them very well.
Okay, Henry Kaufman, Al Wojnauer, Gary Wenglowski. Of course, most people know Milton Friedman. At that time, they were saying inflation is ingrained in the system. Get used to it. It's double digit. Just work with it. And at that time, I was in my early 20s. And I was saying, I don't think that's right. And it was fascinating and, just incredible. It was an incredible growth experience to have each one of those people, with the exception of Milton Friedman, come in. And I would debate them in front of our entire portfolio management and research team. And here I was much younger than all of them, but I felt like I knew the way the world was going to work, because Art Laffer, in my classes with him, he would start the classes out, well, first of all, with a joke, always, but then with geopolitics and helping us understand what was going on. And he was able to explain it through Keynesian, various theoretical frameworks, Keynesian, monetarist, Austrian. So Austrian supply side was what he really believed. But because he was able to describe why Harvard, people coming out of Harvard, very Keynesian, Chicago, monetarist, I was able to place all these people in their schools and then use the arguments that art helped us evolve really and integrate into our own thinking during these little debate sessions. And so many times I remember they didn't take me seriously because I was very young, meaning the luminaries of the time.
Right.
But our management team, Sig Sigalis, I don't know if that name rings a bell. He was chief investment officer of Jennison Associates. Bob Kiter loved economics. They believed that I knew what I was talking about. And by the way, if I was right, it was going to be great for Jennison. And it was. It was great. We went but for 4 years, and actually 6 years, not until oil prices crashed in 86, did people really begin to believe that the drop in inflation and interest rates was going to be sustainable. But Henry Kaufman himself, I'll never forget the date, August 17th of 1982, it was the first break in his thinking. He was thinking, maybe.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I do.
Maybe inflation isn't as bad as we think it is. And the market just took off from there.
I remember the date. I remember the time. We just come to the States as a family. I'd come to the States to go to school, high school in 1963, 64. And, so the period you're talking about, I remember like it was yesterday.
Yes.
And the events of it. And, Art Laffer was, for me, a hero. And, it's remarkable. I think he is the one great economist, the single great economist I know who hasn't won a Nobel Prize. I mean, talk about a maverick.
Oh, talk about a maverick. And he's still with us. I speak with him.
I've heard you speak with him.
Yes. Every Employment Friday, we've made that a pact. So we remember to call one another. Do you know, when I moved to New York, I could not say anything about Art Laffer because
Really?
What had happened, we were in the Reagan Revolution, and President Reagan was listening to Art Laffer, cut tax rates dramatically. And the whole thesis around the Laffer curve is if you cut tax rates, tax revenue will go up. Because people will come out of the gray market, the cash society, and start paying taxes. Well, what he didn't count on was that Chairman Volcker would be strangling inflation, throwing us into a massive recession. So tax revenue did not pick up, and we ended up at a 5.5% deficit as a percent of GDP compared to where we are now, 7%.
Right.
But that was during a recession. Nonetheless, everyone said, that theory has just been disproven. And then, of course, we got out of that recession. And the Laffer curve, I think, is very well respected now because it's one of the reasons we ended up in a surplus in the 90s under Clinton/Gingrich.
Right. And really unfortunate that Reagan was followed by George H.W. Bush. It was really an unfortunate moment. But nonetheless, I mean, Clinton/Gingrich renewed our faith, I think, somewhat. Right?
Yes.
So that's an amazing story. I mean, it reminds me of my own grandfather who came from, Eastern Europe, Russia, what is the Ukraine, that area today, to South Africa, also drove his children to education. Every one of them got, a degree.
Yes.
I know my father's youngest brother did his pharmaceutical degree. And then he said, no, I really want to be a doctor. My grandfather said, look, every one of my sons will have a university degree, but not 2 universities. But he actually paid his way through his own medical degree. So,
yeah, just in terms of that period really did form me as a professional, because I learned if everybody is running in this direction, they all believe the same thing. Deficits, it's a little bit like today.
It is.
If everyone's moving in that direction, and there is reason and evidence to start moving in the opposite direction, that usually pays off big time. And it certainly paid off for Jennison. The next 20 years, that was the heyday of truly active equity management and technology breakthroughs, all starting with the PC, transistor PC, and then the software explosion.
But we see that pattern today, don't we?
Yes.
We see that pattern, and you're probably the leading prophet of it. Do you think that President Trump is the right candidate to be able to do a Reagan revolution? Do you think he's going to be able to carry it off? Feels a little crazy right now.
But remember, it felt crazy back then,
it did.
too.
You're right.
The big difference, the very big difference is, he would talk to Tip O'Neill and,
Yes.
who was the Speaker of the House, and did try to cultivate relationships on the other side.
Yes.
We're not seeing that now. And I think it's the fault of both sides.
Yes.
But I wouldn't be surprised. If he does start forging some relationships to get the job done. What I find interesting about the tax rate cuts that he is proposing, very wisely, he started with tips, overtime, and Social Security. Think about those demographics. That's not the wealthy. Right, for the most part. It's not the wealthy. So he starts there. And then there are tariffs, which are the equivalent of sales taxes. Yes. Very regressive if they're passed through onto pricing. Although we've seen countries like China devalue so that they wouldn't be passed on in pricing. And I think if we're reading between the lines to the lines that Kevin Hassett is writing and as he's giving interviews, my sense is there is a tax rate reduction towards a flatter tax. President Trump makes wild statements. He thinks we shouldn't have an income tax. We shouldn't have capital gains taxes. And we're not going to get away with those disappearing. But going back a little bit towards where the country started, where tariffs funded our government. We didn't have an income tax in the early days. And now we have the opposite. Maybe there's a little bit of equilibration there, especially around this reciprocity idea. If you, Canada, are taxing milk or putting a tariff on milk of 250%,